Bang, bang, bang. It was 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday when someone started hammering on my front door like the place was on fire. Groggy and still in my boxers, I stumbled down the hall, half blind with sleep, and cracked it open only to come face with the final boss of Karens. There she stood, fake blonde bob stiff with hairspray, a too-tight knockoff blazer that screamed wannabe authority, and a scowl so intense it could curdle milk. "You need to move that boat right now," she shrieked. Before I could even get a good morning out, behind her was a thick clipboard bursting with paper and a roll of fluorescent orange violation stickers that looked like they'd been stolen straight from a city tow truck. I hadn't even brushed my teeth yet, and this woman was threatening my weekend. I didn't know it yet, but this moment me, half naked and confused, her foaming at the mouth was just the first shot in a war that would end with her stuffing her belongings into a U-Haul while the neighborhood applauded. Let me back up. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 39 years old, a freelance graphic designer, and I moved to Sunset Harbor, Florida, about 18 months ago after my divorce. I came here chasing peace, quiet mornings, fishing, a bit of solitude. I bought a cozy little house that came with a private dock extending into the lake, where I kept a modest 14-foot boat with Lazy Sunday painted on the side. That dock was my sanctuary. Every morning, I'd sit with my coffee, listen to the water lap against the posts, and watch the sunrise like a promise. It was the calm I needed, at least, until Hurricane Karen came storming in. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, trying to stay polite despite being mostly asleep and almost entirely unclothed. "That's my boat. It's on my dock. I've kept it there since I moved in." Her expression twisted like I'd told her I moonlighted as a pirate. Your dock," she repeated, then laughed, but not the kind of laugh that invites you in. No. This was the unhinged, maniacal kind that makes you take a step back and check for exits. "This is community water," she declared, "and that boat is in violation of Section 12.3b of the Homeowners Association regulations." With a theatrical flourish, she slapped a blinding orange sticker on the side of my boat like she was issuing a warrant. I stared at her in disbelief as she began taking photos from every angle, her oversized clipboard held like a badge. "Excuse me," I asked, still trying to understand if this was real life. "Who are you exactly?" She puffed up like a peacock. "I'm Dana Ellison, president of the Sunset Harbor Homeowners Association, and you are in serious violation of community standards." Standing there in my underwear while Dana spouted off like some HOA dictator was surreal. But she wasn't done. She produced what looked like an official violation notice, but it was clearly printed on standard computer paper with enough fonts and borders to make a kindergartner dizzy. "You have 24 hours to remove this unauthorized watercraft or you'll be fined $500 per day," she announced like she was handing down a federal indictment. $500, I repeated. Was I still dreaming? "The rules are very clear," she said, adjusting her, obviously, fake earrings. "No personal watercraft in community areas without proper authorization. That dock might be attached to your property, but the water is shared community space." She said it with the confidence of someone who had never questioned themselves in their life. I looked past her and saw her Coron old dinged-up BMW parked square in the middle of my driveway like she owned it. "Look," I said, trying to keep things civil. "When I bought this house, I was told the dock came with the property. I have all the paperwork." Dana waved a dismissive hand. "Paperwork can be wrong. I've lived here for 3 years. I know the rules better than anyone." Then, like it was her mic drop moment, she took one last photo and stomped back to her car. 24 hours, she called, and don't think of ignoring this. I'll be watching. As she drove off back to the smallest house in the development, I noticed Ty couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. She threw around president like it made her royalty, but everything about her screamed desperate need for control. Back inside, I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Part of me considered just moving the boat to avoid drama. Life's too short, right? But something about Dana's smugness, her complete dismissal of facts, the way she talked down to me like I was a criminal for enjoying my own property. I wasn't going to roll over for that. I picked up the phone and called someone I never thought I'd lean on again, my ex-wife Rachel. We'd split on good terms, and more importantly, she was a property lawyer. "Hey," I said when she picked up. "Weird question, can you explain HOA rules to me?" There was a pause. "Nathan, what happened?" I gave her the full download, Dana, the sticker, the fine, the absurd rules, and the threat of daily penalties. "Bring me your deed and any HOA paperwork you got when you bought the place," she said. "I'll look it over this afternoon." "But Nathan, $500 a day. That sounds illegal. Most HOAs can't enforce fines like that without due process. And private docks are usually private." When Rachel showed up later, she had her game face on, the one she wore when she was about to demolish someone in court. She spread my property documents across the table and combed through them. "Nathan," she said after 10 minutes, tapping the survey with a pen, "your dock is 100% yours. You own the shoreline, your property ends at the water's edge. The dock has been there since the house was built. So Dana's wrong, I asked, even though I already knew. She's not just wrong, she might not even be legitimate, Rachel said. I don't see any record of her being formally elected HOA president. There's no meeting minutes, no signatures. She may have just claimed the title. Now it was getting interesting. Rachel gathered the papers and looked me dead in the eye. Nathan, be careful. You're dealing with someone on a power trip. The next morning, I was back on my dock, coffee in hand, when I noticed an elderly woman walking toward me. She had a soft smile and kind eyes. You must be Nathan, she said. I'm Evelyn Brooks. I live in the blue house down the street. I just wanted to apologize for yesterday. I invited her to sit. Intrigued. Apologize. For Dana, she said, lowering her voice. She's not well elected. A few of us tried to organize a formal HOA years ago, but it never stuck. Dana showed up, said she'd handle things, and just started acting like she was in charge. Most of us just ignore her. I blinked. So she has no actual authority. Evelyn shook her head. Not legally, but she's persistent. Threatens people. Intimidates the newer residents. Most are too tired or too busy to fight her. But I've seen her drive out good families. She tried it with me until I threatened to sue. That was it. I'd had enough. That evening, Rachel helped me draft a cease and desist letter. It cited property law, her lack of legal authority, and warned her that continued harassment would lead to legal action. I also called the county clerk and confirmed there was no active HOA registered to Sunset Harbor. I delivered the letter to Dana personally the next morning. She tried to argue, waving her phony violation sheet like it meant something. I calmly explained the truth. The HOA had no standing, her title was self-assigned, and if she came near my property again, I'd involve the police. For the first time, Dana didn't have a comeback. Over the next week, I spoke to my neighbors. Turns out, Dana had fined people for bird feeders, patio furniture, even for leaving Christmas lights up too long. Armed with Rachel's guidance, I helped a few of them draft similar letters. Word spread fast. By month's end, Dana's threats were hollow. Her sticker roll disappeared. Her clipboard was nowhere to be seen. And then, one morning, I saw Ida U-Haul parked outside her house. She was loading boxes. Alone, no one offered to help. As she slammed the truck door and drove away, a few neighbors stood outside, waving goodbye. Some even clapped. I went back to my dock, poured my coffee, and smiled at the still water. It was peaceful again. But now, I knew something deeper. Peace isn't always something you find. Sometimes, you have to fight for it. Apologize for what? I asked. Evelyn settled into the chair next to mine and let out a tired sigh. For Dana Ellison, she said, she's been terrorizing this neighborhood for months. As the sun rose behind us, she told me stories that made my blood boil. Dana had called code enforcement on families because their kids drew chalk art on the sidewalks. She'd tried to ban things like grilling on front lawns and kids playing catch in their own driveways. She treated the neighborhood like her own personal dictatorship. The woman is obsessed with control, Evelyn said, shaking her head. Ever since her divorce, she's been channeling her bitterness into running this place like a boot camp. I think she targets anyone who looks content. You look peaceful. That probably drives her insane. Later that evening, I found a note taped to my front door. It was printed in bold red letters like a horror movie flyer. Emergency HOA meeting, tonight 7 p.m. Community Center, urgent violations to discuss. I could practically feel Dana's gleeful energy radiating from the paper. If she wanted a meeting, then I'd give her one. I gathered my deed, my survey, my dock permits, every shred of paperwork I had, and made my way to the community center. But I walked into looked more like a low-budget parody than a serious meeting. Dana had set up a cheap projector and was standing front and center like she was running a Fortune 500 board meeting. She wore a different power outfit, a stiff navy pantsuit, held a wooden gavel that looked like it had come from a dollar store. Around 15 neighbors sat in folding chairs, many of them looking confused and half-interested. Dana called the meeting to order, like she was banging the opening bell on Wall Street. We're here tonight to address serious violations of community standards, she announced in her best courtroom drama voice. As your HOA president, it's my duty to uphold property values and ensure compliance with the rules. I noticed a few people exchanging looks. Some had eyebrows raised. It was clear I wasn't the only one questioning her authority. Then she flipped to a PowerPoint slide. Yes, a literal PowerPoint slide with a photo of my boat plastered on the screen, complete with a big red circle and a giant X over it. The next slide was titled, Unauthorized Watercraft, the Threat to Community Order. When she finished her presentation, I stood. I'd like to respond to these allegations, I said, keeping my voice calm. I walked to the front and laid out my documents on the table so everyone could see. This, I said, pointing to the survey, is my official property deed. As you can clearly see, my property line extends to the water's edge. The dock in question is entirely on my land. The room leaned forward. Some folks squinted to read the fine print. Dana's face turned several different shades red-pink, then ghostly white. Furthermore, I added, flipping to another page, I have all the required permits for the dock. It was built legally. It meets every standard. And yes, the boat is docked on private property. Dana studied the documents with squinted eyes and tight lips. You could see the gears turning in her head. She knew her narrative was collapsing. She wasn't about to admit it, well, she said, her voice several notes higher than before, even if the dock is technically yours. Boats in the community still require HOA authorization. The air in the room shifted. People were clearly growing tired of Dana's soapbox performance. Emergency rule change, she blurted, effective immediately. All boats in Sunset Harbor must pay a monthly dock maintenance fee of $2,000. The silence was absolute. Then, like popcorn, voices burst out. 2,000. That's insane. You can't just make that up. I raised my hand slightly. Where in the bylaws does it say you can impose that fee? I have full authority as HOA president, Dana snapped, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her unraveling composure. That's when Evelyn stood up. Since when? She asked. Because I don't remember voting for you. Others began. Murmuring in agreement, Mr. Patterson from down the street chimed in. What board elected you? Dana looked around, eyes darting from face to face, her panic growing. I was elected by the board. She insisted. What board? Someone else asked. The tension snapped. Residents began pulling out their phones, recording the meeting as Dana Trident failed to regain control. Her carefully constructed image of power disintegrated in front of everyone. This meeting is adjourned, she declared, practically shrieking, as she snatched up her gavel and laptop. She bolted for the exit like a cartoon villain caught red-handed. As people filed out, several neighbors came over to shake my hand. Thanks for standing up to her, said Mrs. Chen. That nonsense has gone on for too long. You've got backbone. Nathan, Evelyn added, patting my shoulder. Dana doesn't know what to do when people push back. I walked home with a strange mix of satisfaction and caution. Dana had been humiliated, but I knew her type. She wasn't going to take that lying down. That night, I dove deeper. I opened my laptop and started digging through county and community records, determined to understand exactly what Dana had been hiding behind. What I found made my stomach turn. There was no official HOA registered for Sunset Harbor. Nothing. No filings. No board. No tax ID. No governing body at all. Dana Ellison had literally fabricated an entire homeowners association and appointed herself president. But it got even better. According to property records, Dana didn't even own her house. She was renting the smallest unit in the community, an old 2-bedroom with no waterfront view. She wasn't just pretending to lead an HOA. She didn't even have a stake in the community. She was trying to rule. It all made sense. Her obsession with rules. Her thirst for control. Her constant need to prove she was in charge. She was trying to compensate for the fact that she was the least established person in the neighborhood. Over the next few days, I went into full investigation mode. I documented every time Dana parked illegally in the fire lane. I recorded the loud screaming matches she had on her phone at 6 a.m. I took photos of the cement lawn borders she had installed without any permits. All violations she'd accused others of but now committed herself. Then on Thursday, Evelyn stopped by with the latest neighborhood gossip. You should know Dana's been calling everyone, she whispered conspiratorially. She's trying to drum up support for her crusade against you, but it's backfiring. Most people are getting tired of her act. She leaned closer. Also, I may have casually mentioned to a few folks that you have actual legal documentation, and she doesn't. That afternoon, Dana made her next move. She called the county code enforcement office and filed a complaint about my supposedly illegal dock structure. But this time, she didn't catch me off guard. The inspector called me directly. Hey, I got a complaint about your dock, he said. Just have to follow up. Shouldn't take long. I'll be out tomorrow, around 10. I thanked him, then immediately called Rachel to let her know what was happening. Friday morning arrived with crystal clear skies and a breeze coming off the lake. I was sitting on my dock, sipping coffee, when a county truck pulled up and a man in a navy polo stepped out. Mr. Cole, he asked. Mike Rodriguez. I'm here about that dock complaint. I handed him my binder with all the permits and property paperwork. Mike took his time, walking along the dock, taking a few measurements, flipping through the documents. After about 15 minutes, he nodded. Everything looks good here, he said. The dock is up to code, properly permitted, and within your property lines. No violations whatsoever. That's when I noticed Dana lurking near her house, peering from behind her porch column, waiting to see if the law would finally fall in her favor. Mike noticed too. He looked at her, then back at me. Actually, he said, flipping open his notebook again, there's something else. He pointed toward Dana's house. I couldn't help but notice she's parked in the red zone again. That's technically a fire lane. I blinked. You can write her up for that. He smiled. I can, and I will. As he walked toward her driveway with his clipboard, I took another sip of coffee and watched the sun reflect off the water. Dana's rain was crumbling in this time. It wasn't just me pushing back, it was everyone. I noticed some concrete work in that garden over there. Is that on your property? Mike asked, gesturing toward the overly ornate borders surrounding Dana's flower beds. I followed his gaze. No, that's my neighbor's place. What happened next was better than any comedy sketch. Mike calmly walked over to examine the concrete edging while Dana emerged from her house, flustered and wide-eyed, like she hadn't expected the spotlight to turn on her. Ma'am, Mike began, clipboard in hand. I need to ask you about these concrete borders. Do you have permits for this hardscaping? Dana's expression morphed from smug to confused to outright panicked. Permits? I'm the one who called you. Mike remained patient but firm. Ma'am, this appears to be on your rental property, and county code requires permits for any permanent concrete installations. He started scribbling on his clipboard as Dana's voice climbed higher. But I'm the one who called you. You're supposed to be citing him. She jabbed her finger in my direction like I was the villain of the story. I sipped my coffee slowly from my dock, doing my best not to laugh. Mike tore a citation off his pad and handed it to her. Ma'am, I'm issuing a violation notice for unpermitted hardscaping. You have 30 days to either obtain proper permits or remove the work. The fine is $850. Dana's face turned from red to purple. This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president, ma'am. That doesn't override county building codes. Mike replied calmly. He returned to me and shook my hand. Your dock is fully legal, Mr. Cole. Have a good day. Neighbors peeking from windows, some recording Dana's unraveling. The neighborhood had officially turned into a live reality show. Dana stormed across the lawn toward my dock, fuming. This is your fault, she shouted. You turned them all against me. I stood, composed. Dana, I didn't turn anyone against you. The inspector asked for documents, and I provided legal proof. If your concrete work violates code, that's between you and the county. She narrowed her eyes. You think you're so clever, don't you? But I know people. I have connections. This isn't over. And with that, she spun on her heel and stormed back into her house, slamming the door so hard it echoed across the water. Within an hour, my phone buzzed with texts from neighbors who'd seen the show. Evelyn's message stood out. Just watched. The best reality TV episode ever. No subscription required. That night, I realized I needed to understand exactly what I had inherited when I bought this place. I called Rachel and asked if she could meet me for dinner. I think I'm missing something, I told her. Dana acts like she's protecting some secret, but she's just a renter. Why is she so desperate to control everything? Rachel was quiet for a moment. Nathan, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your grandfather's estate. There were some parts of your inheritance I didn't think mattered at the time, but now, they might explain everything. There was a pause. I could hear her rustling through papers in the background. Can you come to my office tomorrow? She said. There are documents you need to see. Then came the words that froze me in place. Nathan, we need to talk. Saturday morning, I sat in Rachel's office surrounded by manila folders and heavy legal documents. Apparently, my life was about to change again. Nathan, she said, laying out papers across the conference table. When your grandfather passed and left you the house, you asked me to handle the basic transfer title deed, taxes, that kind of thing. I nodded, remembering how grief-stricken and overwhelmed I'd been. Well, Rachel continued. The house was the simple part, but your grandfather's estate wasn't simple at all. She slid over an old survey map. He bought this entire area back in the 1980s when it was still farmland. I stared at the map, trying to grasp what I was seeing. The entire area, I asked. Rachel pointed to several parcels. Yes, the lake, the land under 18 of the 23 houses in this development. He developed the area slowly, selling homes but retaining ownership of key pieces of infrastructure, like the lake. Then she showed me a thick, notarized deed with official seals and signatures. Nathan, she said gently, you own Sunset Harbor Lake, all 180 acres, plus the land beneath most of these homes. I sat back, stunned. I owned the lake. The lake Dana had been threatening me over. But, I would have known that, right? I asked, already realizing the answer. Rachel smiled. Nathan, when you inherited the estate, you told me you didn't want to deal with any of the complicated stuff. You were exhausted. You said, and I quote, just get me the house. I don't care about the rest. So I kept all the corporate assets under separate entities. Your grandfather set them up that way for tax purposes. She handed me a breakdown, LLCs, trusts, access rights, and long-term lease agreements. Most of the residents pay an annual fee for lake access and utilities. They don't own the land beneath their homes, they lease it from one of your companies. As the information sank in, Dana's entire campaign suddenly made perfect sense. So when she said the lake was community property, I began. She was dead wrong, Rachel said. She has zero authority over the lake. It's private property. Yours? I stared at the documents, stunned. I'm not just a guy with a fishing boat, I muttered. I'm the guy who owns the body of water she's been trying to police. Rachel chuckled. Exactly. And technically, you could ban her from the lake. I could, I asked, half joking. Technically, yes, Rachel said, though I'd suggest diplomacy. As I drove home, my thoughts raced. Every peaceful moment on the dock had actually been on my own lake. Every threat Dana had hurled was a bluff at the very person who had the legal right to control the water. But the revelation party didn't last long. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw a crowd forming near the community center. Dana's shrill voice carried across the water like a siren. We need to take decisive action, she declared. Nathan Cole has shown complete disrespect for our community standards, and we cannot let that stand. I walked over, staying. On the edge of the group, Dana was standing on a folding chair, waving papers and trying to rally people. But the faces staring back at her weren't convinced. He flaunts his boat like rules don't apply to him, she continued. He undermined my authority. Evelyn leaned over and whispered, you should say something. I stepped forward calmly. Dana, I said, loud enough for the crowd, you've been operating as president of an HOA. That doesn't exist. You've fined residents, threatened them, and staged meetings without legal authority. And now you're trying to rally people against me for what? Using my own property? Dana's eyes widened, and for a second, she looked cornered. You don't own the lake, she shouted. I raised the deed. Actually, I do. This document, filed with the county and notarized, proves I inherited it. Sunset Harbor Lake is private property, and I have the full legal right to access it, use it, and protect it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, wait, he owns the lake. Evelyn, bless her, added, and he's never fined a single person for sidewalk chalk. Dana's eyes darted across the group. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. This is a vendetta, I continued. And now, it's over. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to share documents. But I think we've had enough drama. The crowd began to disperse, shaking their heads. A few clapped. One man actually offered to help me clean the dock. As Dana slunk back toward her house, someone muttered, time to elect a real board. Evelyn caught my eye and smiled. You might have just saved the neighborhood, she said. I looked out. Across the water, the lake I now knew was mine. Peace had returned, but this time it was backed by the law. I watched from the edge of the crowd as Dana whipped herself into a frenzy. He thinks he can just ignore our rules because he's got some lawyer friend, she ranted, pacing in front of her makeshift rally. Well, I have news for him. This is our community, and we decide who belongs here. Some residents shifted uncomfortably. A few, clearly unaware of the real situation, nodded along. Dana had spent the past few days rallying the people who didn't live near the lake, those who hadn't seen the confrontations or read the actual documents. I motioned for an immediate vote, Dana declared, her voice sharp. All in favor of permanently banning Nathan Cole from community lake access. Say aye. To my surprise, 3 voices rang out with uncertain eyes. I recognized them as residents from the opposite end of the neighborhood, people who likely had no idea the lake wasn't public in the first place. All opposed. Dana asked quickly, trying to rush it through. Evelyn's voice rang out. This is ridiculous. You can't ban someone just because you don't like them. The motion passes, Dana said triumphantly, ignoring Evelyn and clearly making up the rules. As she went, Nathan Cole is hereby banned from all community amenities, effective immediately. If he violates this ban, he'll be subject to trespassing charges. She was beaming, pleased with herself, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just banned the legal owner of the lake from accessing his own property. As the crowd dispersed, Evelyn made her way over to me. I'm sorry about that circus, she said. Dana only invited her little group, and she rushed the vote before anyone else could speak. It's not legitimate, and most of the neighborhood knows it. I thanked her, but honestly, I wasn't upset. I was fascinated. Dana had gone so far in her delusion of authority that she had officially banned the actual landowner from his own lake. That night, I sat at the edge of my dock, the legal documents Rachel had given me in my lap. The stars reflected off the surface of my lake, and for the first time, I truly understood what people meant when they talked about generational wealth. My grandfather hadn't just left me a house, he'd left me a legacy. And Dana Ellison had absolutely no idea what she'd just stepped into. As his truck pulled away, I noticed several as I stared at the deed in my hands. I almost laughed. The person she'd banned was the one person who could legally shut down her entire charade. The next morning, I called Rachel. She banned you from the lake, she asked, barely containing her laughter. Nathan, she just banned the legal owner of the lake from using it. Do you understand how absurd that is? I'm starting to, I said. What's our next move? We wait, Rachel replied. Let her keep digging. And when the time is right, we show everyone the truth. Dana wasted no time escalating things. By Monday morning, she had posted homemade laminated signs around the lake. Public community, water, nitrogen monox, trespassing violators will be PROs, ECUTD mounted on metal stakes. The signs looked halfway official, but the craftsmanship was amateur. She even went so far as to hire Tyler Patterson, a 19-year-old neighborhood kid, to serve as lake security, paying him $25 an hour to enforce her ban. Tuesday morning brought one of the most surreal moments of my life. I was sitting on my dock, coffee in hand, when I noticed a kayak approaching. Tyler paddled up, looking beyond uncomfortable. Sir, he called. Mrs. Ellison says you're not allowed to be here. I glanced over to the shoreline, where Dana stood with her phone, clearly recording. Hey, Tyler, I said. What's going on? He winced. She hired me to patrol the lake, says you're prohibited, and I have to ask you to leave. What happened next felt like a scene out of a bad reality show. As I calmly packed up my fishing gear, Dana started live streaming. This is what happens when people think they're above community standards, she said to her small audience. Watch as we restore order to Sunset Harbor. She was practically vibrating with excitement, completely unaware she was broadcasting the harassment of the legal landowner. Of course, I told Tyler, I'll comply, just following the rules. As I moved toward the boat ramp, Dana's voice continued from the shore. Make sure you get him leaving, she called. Tyler paddled beside me, whispering, sorry man, I need gas money, but this is ... weird. The entire neighborhood had come out. Some residents stood with their arms crossed. Others held up their phones, documenting every moment. I loaded my boat onto the trailer while Dana strutted in front of the camera like she was delivering a State of the Union address. Let this be a lesson, she said. No one is above our community's standards. This is what real leadership looks like. Over the next few days, her lake patrol efforts became even more absurd. She placed a folding chair near the shoreline and sat in it like a sentry. Sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, she created fake violation tickets using carbon paper and began distributing them to anyone she didn't recognize. She even started charging residents a guest fee when their family came to the lake. The breaking point came Friday evening. Tyler stopped by my house, looking nervous. Mr. Cole, he said, I wanted to give you a heads up. Mrs. Ellison's planning something big this weekend. She keeps saying she's going to make an example out of you. I think it might get ugly. Saturday morning arrived with postcard perfect weather. I decided it was time to enjoy one final quiet moment on the lake before we dropped the hammer. As I prepped my boat, I noticed Dana setting up on the shoreline again. She had Tyler and two other teenagers with her now, all wearing homemade t-shirts that read Lake Patrol. I launched and made my way to my usual fishing spot. The water was calm, the breeze light, an ideal morning, but peace was short-lived within minutes. The patrol was mobilized. The three teenagers paddled out toward me while Dana barked orders from shore through a walkie-talkie. Sir, Tyler called, reaching my boat, you need to leave the water immediately. You're in violation of community regulations. Mrs. Ellison says she'll call the police if you don't comply. I looked at the three of them, each one visibly uncomfortable. Just doing your jobs, right? I asked. They nodded sheepishly. As I loaded my gear and turned the boat back toward the ramp, I saw residents gathering again along the shoreline. Small groups whispered, many clearly confused or amused. Some waved at me as I passed. Evelyn stood by her garden and gave me a thumbs up. Dana had gone too far. Her few remaining supporters were now starting to second-guess their allegiance. That evening, I sent a short message to Rachel. Tomorrow, it's time. Her response came back immediately. I'll bring the popcorn. This is going to be good. Dana had just publicly humiliated the owner of everything she thought she controlled. She had no idea what was coming. Sunday evening arrived, with a dramatic sunset like the universe itself was preparing a stage. Dana had called another emergency community meeting to make my ban permanent and announce new lake security protocols. I arrived at the community center with Rachel, both of us carrying thick folders filled with documents that would change everything. The room was packed. Word had spread about Dana's recent behavior, and people were curious to see what she would pull next. Dana had outdone herself with the theatrics. She stood at the front of the room in what was clearly her best outfit, wearing large, fake jewelry that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Her confidence was undeniable. She truly believed this was the night she would solidify her power. We're here tonight to address a serious threat to our community. Dana began, clicking to the first slide of her presentation, a photo of me fishing, with a red slash through it. Nathan Cole has shown complete disrespect for our community standards. Tonight, we will make his ban permanent and define clear consequences for those who ignore our decisions. She went on to outline her new enforcement protocols. Slide after slide showed increasingly absurd ideas: community patrols, laminated warning signs, and an org chart with Dana at the top. Under the title, Community Standards Director. The chart even had residents assigned to roles in her fake security team. People were shifting in their seats, exchanging confused glances. Before we vote, Dana said, building to her grand finale, I want everyone to understand the stakes. If we allow people like Nathan to ignore our rules, Our property values will plummet. Our peaceful neighborhood will turn into chaos. We must stand strong. I stood up. Excuse me, I said. Before anyone votes, there's something you all need to know. Dana's face flushed, deep red. You're banned from speaking. Security, escort this trespasser out. She turned to the back of the room, but her so-called security team, 3 teenagers, seemed fascinated with their phones. I walked calmly to the front and laid a large document on the table. This is my property deed, I said. The room fell silent. People leaned forward as I pointed to the map. According to this, I own Sunset Harbor Lake, all of it, 180 acres of private water. Gasps echoed around the room. Dana sputtered, "That's ridiculous. You can't own a lake. This is public." Rachel stepped forward and added more documents. These are property records from the 1980s. Nathan's grandfather bought the watershed and the surrounding land. It was passed to Nathan legally. You're lying, Dana screamed. Show me proof. I spread out the original survey map, the development blueprints, and the deed. The documents clearly stated that I owned not only the lake, but also the land under 18 of the 23 houses in Sunset Harbor. The room exploded in conversation. Some residents demanded to see the papers. Others started recording on their phones. A few people quietly slipped out the door. What does this mean for our houses? Someone asked. Are we trespassing? Came another voice. Dana's hands trembled as she shuffled through the papers, her expression contorting in disbelief. Even if this is true, she said shakily, you can't just evict people. There are laws, responsibilities. I nodded. I agree. Nobody is being kicked out. Most of you have long-term lease agreements that I plan to honor. I'm not here to be some tyrant. But we do need to talk about how this community is managed. Paused. I didn't even know I owned the lake until this week. I inherited it with my grandfather's estate, but now that I understand, we need to stop operating under fiction. Then I walked out and returned with a professionally printed sign. Private property, Sunset Harbor, lake owner, Nathan Cole. I installed it in the exact spot where Dana had planted her community water signs. Turning to Dana, I said, we need change, and it starts with honest leadership. Dana's face crumpled. This isn't fair. I've worked so hard. I sacrificed everything for this community. Some residents actually laughed. The irony was impossible to ignore. Dana had bullied people with fake authority, and now that real authority had shown up, she couldn't handle it. Dana, I said gently, you rent the smallest unit in the development. You appointed yourself to a position that doesn't exist, and you've been making people miserable with made-up rules. That ends now. She looked around the room, searching for allies, but she found only silence and glowing phone screens. We'll hold a real election in 48 hours, I told the room. Everyone gets a vote, not just Dana's hand-picked group. We need someone who truly represents this community. I looked at Dana. We need someone who understands the difference between leadership and control. Dana slowly packed up her things, her hands trembling. Her glittery outfit now looked more like a costume than clothing. This isn't over, she muttered. But everyone could see that it was. Tyler Patterson started a slow clap. Others joined. Dana walked out to scattered applause for me. The meeting continued for over an hour. Residents asked about lease terms, lake access, and future governance. For the first time, the atmosphere was open and hopeful. People felt relieved. As I gathered my papers, Evelyn approached with a wide smile. Nathan, she said, I think you just saved this neighborhood. I looked around the room, feeling the weight of the past week lift from my shoulders. I had come here just wanting to enjoy a quiet life by the water. But now, I understood something deeper. Peace isn't given some. You have to fight for it, she said. I think you handled that perfectly firm but fair. She paused, thoughtfully. Though I have a feeling Dana isn't done. When someone's entire identity crumbles like that, they don't usually go quietly. Monday morning brought an unusual quiet to Sunset Harbor. Dana's security patrols had stopped. Her homemade signs had been removed, and for the first time in months, residents could enjoy the lake without fear of harassment. But I knew Dana well enough to suspect she wasn't going down without a fight. Sure enough, around 10 a.m., I saw her car pull out of her driveway and head toward town with obvious determination. Dana had driven straight to a strip mall, law office sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The lawyer, Jerry Hoffman, listened patiently as Dana explained her situation and presented her folder of homemade HOA documents. After 15 minutes of review, Jerry delivered the news she didn't want to hear. Ma'am, this gentleman legally owns the lake. The documentation appears legitimate and dates back 40 years. Your homeowners association appears to be informal. Dana pressed him desperately, insisting there had to be some loophole way to challenge my ownership. But Jerry explained that being president of a non-existent organization didn't override property law, and that challenging legitimate property deeds from 40 years ago would cost more money than she could possibly afford. The consultation cost her $200 for very bad news. Meanwhile, the community was organizing itself properly for the first time. Evelyn Brooks had stepped up to coordinate a legitimate election, and residents were excited about fair representation. That evening, we held the first honest community meeting Sunset Harbor had seen in years. 22 of the 23 residents showed up, everyone except Dana, who was apparently too humiliated to face her neighbors. The vote was swift and decisive. Dana was removed from her self-appointed position by a margin of 21-1. Evelyn was elected as interim community coordinator with unanimous support, and we established simple, reasonable guidelines for community governance. No more arbitrary fines. No more harassment. No more fake authority. Just neighbors working together to maintain a pleasant place to live. But Dana wasn't ready to accept defeat. On Tuesday afternoon, she appeared at my front door looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and her eyes darted around desperately. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk." I invited her in, curious to see what her final play would be. She tried several approaches in rapid succession. First, bargaining. "What? If I help you manage the community, I could be your property manager. I know everyone's business, their habits, their problems. You need someone like me." Then, pleading. "I've put everything into this place. It's all I have left after my divorce. Please don't make me start over again." Finally, threats. "You can't just kick me out. I'll contact the media. I'll tell them how you deceived an entire community. I'll sue for wrongful eviction." I listened to her entire emotional cycle before responding calmly. "Dana, you have 30 days to find new housing arrangements. I'm not evicting you out of spy time, ending the lease where the tenant has been harassing other residents and the landlord." The finality seemed to hit her all at once. She broke down crying, but even in her tears there was still entitlement. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "I was just trying to maintain standards." "No," I replied firmly. "You were trying to control people because it made you feel important. There's a difference." She left that afternoon, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen anyone. True to my word, I didn't evict any other residents. Instead, I worked with Rachel to create fair lease agreements that gave people security while maintaining reasonable community standards. I eliminated all of Dana's arbitrary rules and established simple guidelines, focused on actual quality of life issues. No more harassment about flowers, children's art, or normal neighborhood activities. The transformation was remarkable. Within a month, Sunset Harbor had become the kind of community people actually wanted to live in. Property values increased. There was a waiting list of people hoping to move in, and residents were genuinely happy to be there. We organized monthly community barbecues by the lake and established a sensible neighborhood watch program. The final scene of Dana's Sunset Harbor story played out on a Thursday morning in late August. I was having my morning coffee on the dock when I heard the distinctive rumble of a moving truck. Looking toward Dana's house, I could see her directing movers as they loaded her belongings into a beat-up U-Haul. Several neighbors had gathered to watch, though, whether out of sympathy or satisfaction was hard to tell. As the truck pulled away, Dana took one last look around the community she'd tried so hard to control. Our eyes met across the water, and for just a moment, I saw not the petty tyrant who had made everyone's life miserable, but a broken woman who had lost everything she thought mattered. She stood there for a long moment, probably realizing that all her schemes and power plays had led to this inevitable end. Then she got in her car and drove away, leaving Sunset Harbor peaceful for the first time in months. Several neighbors had watched the entire departure, and I noticed a few people actually waved goodbye, not out of meanness, but perhaps with a sense of closure for the whole bizarre chapter of community life. That evening, as I sat on my dock watching another spectacular sunset over my lake, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I had been a simple graphic designer who just wanted to fish in peace. Now, I was a property owner who had accidentally become the protector of a small community. The whole experience had taught me something important about the difference between real authority and fake power. Dana had spent months trying to create authority through intimidation and fake credentials. But real authority comes from actually having responsibility and using it wisely. She'd been so focused on controlling others that she'd forgotten the most basic rule of leadership. You have to actually serve the people you're supposed to lead. As the stars came out over Sunset Harbor Lake, I thought about my grandfather and the legacy he'd left me. He'd built something that would last, something that could provide homes and happiness for families for generations. Dana had tried to tear that down with her petty tyranny, but in the end, the truth had won out. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't fighting back harder. It's just showing people who they decided to mess with. And sometimes, when you inherit something bigger than you expected, the best thing you can do is use that power to make life better for everyone around you. That's exactly what I plan to do. HF Exposed. Here reality feels like fiction, and fiction wishes it was this juicy. Hit that like before the next bombshell drops.